There's a moment that happens to almost every person alive. You are in a room. The right people are there. The stakes are real. Maybe it is a job interview and the hiring manager is looking at you with that politely neutral expression that gives nothing away. Maybe it is a first date and the silence is stretched just a little too long. Maybe it is a boardroom and the CEO has just asked for your opinion in front of 12 people who are all watching you with careful eyes. And in that moment, something strange and terrible happens. Your mind, which moments ago was full of ideas and clarity, and everything you want to say, goes quiet. Not completely quiet. It floods, but with the wrong things. With doubt, with a sudden awareness of your own heartbeat, with the ghost of every conversation that ever went wrong. You open your mouth, and what comes out is thinner than what you meant. Shorter, less certain. And the moment passes, and someone else speaks, and the room moves on, and you are left standing there knowing, feeling in your chest, that something was lost. Not because you weren't smart enough. Not because you didn't have the right ideas, but because the words weren't there when you needed them. This is one of the most quietly devastating experiences a human being can have. And what makes it so insidious is that most people never trace it back to its real cause. They tell themselves they are introverted. They tell themselves they are just not a natural speaker. They decide that some people are born with the gift of communication, and they simply were not among them. But here is what no one tells you. Communication is not a gift. It is a science. It is a set of psychological principles, deeply studied and precisely understood, that anyone can learn, practice, and master. The people who speak with magnetic confidence and effortless influence are not operating on some mysterious frequency that is closed to you. They are using specific techniques, often without even knowing it consciously, that trigger specific responses in other people's brains. And today, we are going to reverse engineer all of it. Over the next several hours, we're going to go deep, not surface level tips, not make eye contact and smile more. We are going to the psychological roots of why humans communicate the way they do, why some people capture attention and trust instantly while others fade into background, and exactly what you can do, starting with your very next conversation, to transform how the world hears you. By the time we reach the end of this journey together, you'll understand how confident speakers think before they open their mouths. You will know how to walk into any room, with any group of people, and establish presence before you say a single word. You'll understand the hidden architecture of persuasion, the neuroscience of trust, the psychology of silence, and the secret emotional triggers that make people lean forward and actually listen. This is not about becoming someone you are not. This is about becoming the most powerful version of who you already are. Let us begin. Chapter 1, the one conversation that changes everything. Think about your own life for a moment. Think about the conversations that altered your path. Maybe it was someone who believed in you loudly at a time when you had stopped believing in yourself. Maybe it was a negotiation that went your way because you said exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. Maybe it was a single sentence that ended a relationship or started one, or cracked open a door that had been closed for years. Human life is, at its most fundamental level, a series of conversations. Every opportunity you have ever received came through language. Every relationship you have ever built was constructed word by word. Every setback that could have been avoided if you had communicated differently. We live inside language the way fish live inside water, so completely that we forget it is there. Forget that it is the medium through which everything we want flows to us or is withheld from us. Psychologists call this the primacy of communication. Studies show that up to 85% of our professional success is determined not by technical skill or raw intelligence, but by our ability to communicate, relate, and cooperate with other people. 85%. That means the ceiling on your career, your relationships, your influence is almost entirely set by how well you speak, listen, and connect. Here is the uncomfortable truth that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. You can be brilliant and invisible. You can be talented and passed over. You can have the right ideas and still lose the room to someone with half your intelligence and twice your confidence. The game is not always won by the best player. It is won by the player who communicates best under pressure. But here is the liberating flip side of that same truth. You do not need to be the most naturally gifted person in the room. You do not need to be the loudest or the most extroverted or the most charismatic in some genetic, born-with-it sense. You need to understand how communication actually works at the psychological level. Because once you understand the wiring, once you see the code underneath the conversation, you can use it consciously. Every chapter of this audiobook is going to give you a piece of that code. And the first piece is perhaps the most important one of all. Chapter 2, Why Smart People Say Stupid Things. There's a phenomenon that researchers in social psychology call cognitive overload, and it is the single most common reason that intelligent, capable people fall apart in important conversations. Here is what happens. When the stakes are high, when you are nervous, when you care deeply about the outcome, your brain activates something called a threat response. Cortisol floods your system. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for complex reasoning, eloquent expression, and nuanced thought, gets partially taken offline. And your amygdala, the ancient alarm system buried deep in your brain, takes over. The amygdala does not care about eloquence. It cares about survival. It is scanning for danger, running worst-case scenarios, flooding you with self-conscious thoughts. Am I being judged? Am I making a good impression? What if I say something wrong? And while that alarm is ringing, the part of your brain that actually forms intelligent sentences is running at reduced capacity. This is why you think of the perfect thing to say 20 minutes after the conversation is over. The French even have a phrase for it. L'esprit de l'escalier, the spirit of the staircase. The perfect comeback you find only when you are already walking down the stairs on your way out. So, what separates powerful communicators from the rest? They have learned to stay calm under communicative pressure, not through willpower, not through forcing themselves to be unafraid, but through specific psychological techniques that literally lower their cortisol response before and during high-stakes conversations. The first technique is what communication researchers call pre-framing. Before an important conversation, powerful communicators deliberately shift their internal narrative about what the conversation means. Instead of telling themselves that this moment is a test they might fail, they tell themselves it is simply an exchange of information. Instead of framing the other person as a judge, they frame them as a curious human who wants to understand them. It sounds almost too simple. But the research on cognitive reappraisal, the science of changing how you interpret an emotionally charged situation, shows that this kind of mental reframing can reduce anxiety markers in the brain by up to 40% before the first word is spoken, before you walk into the room. The second technique is controlled breathing, not the vague advice to take a deep breath that people give each other in a crisis. Specific, deliberate breathing. Slow exhale longer than the inhale. 4 counts in, 6 counts out. This pattern activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which physically suppresses a threat response and allows the prefrontal cortex, your eloquent center, to come back online. Elite communicators do not wait for confidence to appear. They create the neurological conditions for it. Chapter 3, the first 5 seconds. Imagine you are about to meet someone for the first time. You know nothing about them. The door opens, they step in, and before they have said a single word, before they have introduced themselves, before they have spoken a sentence, your brain has already formed a judgment about them, whether they are competent, whether they are trustworthy, whether they are someone you want to engage with or someone you want to disengage from. Research from Princeton University, conducted by psychologist Janine Willis and her colleague Alexander Todorov, found that we make these fundamental social judgments in 1/10 of a second, not 5 seconds, not 1 second, 1/10 of a second. And more alarmingly, the judgments we make in that initial sliver of time tend to stick. Additional information refines them slightly, but rarely reverses them. This is what psychologists call thin-slice cognition. The brain is an extraordinary pattern recognition machine and has learned over millions of years of evolution to read the most critical social signals at extraordinary speed. Your facial muscles, your posture, your movement, the angle of your shoulders, the way you occupy space. All of it broadcasts information that other people's brains decode without any conscious effort at all. Understanding this changes how you think about communication completely. Because most people think a conversation begins when the first words are spoken. But that is wrong. The conversation begins the moment you enter the room, the moment the camera turns on, The moment you cross the threshold, everything before the first word is already communicating something. And what it communicates in those first critical seconds determines whether people are open to hearing what you say or whether they've already, beneath their own conscious awareness, slightly closed themselves off. Powerful communicators understand that presence is the prerequisite for persuasion. Presence is not confidence in the conventional sense of not being nervous. Presence is the physical, visible signal that you are in full command of yourself, that you are not rushing, that you are not apologizing for being in the room. It is communicated through the pace of your movement, not slow, but unhurried, through your eye contact, direct without being confrontational, held long enough to signal security, through the width of your posture, not puffed up or performative, but not collapsed inward either. When a powerful communicator enters a room, the room adjusts to them slightly, not because they are trying to dominate it, but because their physical signals create what social psychologists call a presence halo, an immediate, unconscious impression of competence and self-assurance that makes others naturally inclined to listen. The first 5 seconds are never wasted by the people who know how to use them. Chapter 4, The Architecture of Attention. Here is a question very few communicators ever ask. Why do people actually pay attention? Not in the polite, surface sense of sitting still while someone speaks, but real attention, the kind where you are genuinely absorbed, where you feel pulled forward, where you hang on what comes next because you need to know. That kind of attention is rare and precious, and it is almost never created by information alone. Neuroscience tells us something fascinating about the human brain. It is not designed to pay attention to facts. It is designed to pay attention to change, to pattern interruption, to novelty and contrast and tension and surprise. This is, again, an evolutionary adaptation. Sustained attention to unchanging stimuli is neurologically expensive and serves no survival purpose. But rapid attention to change, to the snap of a twig in a quiet forest, to the shifted tone of someone's voice, to the unexpected development in a story, that attention can mean the difference between life and death. Master communicators exploit this hardwired feature of human neurology constantly, often without consciously labeling what they are doing. The first architecture of attention is tension. Tension is the gap between a question and its answer, between a problem and its solution, between a setup and a punchline. When you create tension, when you say there is something about the situation that most people completely miss, or what I am about to tell you changed the way I operate in every conversation, you have generated what psychologists call an open loop. Open loops create something very close to neurological discomfort. The brain, once it has encountered an unanswered question, is biologically compelled to seek the answer. It cannot simply decide to stop caring about the open loop. The tension drives sustained attention until the loop is closed. This is why great storytellers, great speakers, great teachers, and yes, great salespeople always begin not with answers, but with questions. Not with information, but with tension. They make you need to know what happens next before they tell you. The second architecture of attention is relevance. Human attention is ruthlessly selective, and it selects for one thing above all else. What matters to me right now? This is why the most powerful thing you can do in the opening moments of any communication, whether a presentation, a sales call, a difficult conversation, or even a casual pitch, is answer the question your listener has not yet asked but is already asking silently. Why should I care about this? Every word that comes before the answer to that question is fighting against the listener's natural gravitational pull toward distraction. The most effective communicators lead with relevance. They connect what they're about to say to what their listener already cares about, wants, fears, or is trying to solve. And they do it early, often in the very first sentence. Chapter 5, The Name That Opens Every Door. There's a moment in almost every powerful interaction where everything shifts slightly and becomes more human. You feel it, a sudden relaxing of tension, a gentle opening up of the other person, a sense that you have moved from transacting to connecting. Often, that moment is triggered by something as simple as someone using your name. Dale Carnegie famously observed that a person's name is, to them, the sweetest sound in any language. He was being poetic. But the neuroscience backs him up with striking precision. Research using functional MRI imaging shows that when we hear our own name, a specific cluster of regions in the brain activates. regions associated with self-awareness, identity, and social processing that do not activate in response to other words, even positive ones. Hearing your name being used is a neurological signal that says, I see you specifically, not as a member of a group, not as a function, as you, as an individual. And that signal triggers an immediate, largely unconscious positive response toward the person who said it. But the psychology goes deeper than simple warmth. Research in social identity theory shows that people are fundamentally motivated to maintain and protect their sense of self. When someone uses your name correctly, early, and naturally in a conversation, they are implicitly signaling that your identity matters to them, that you are worth the small investment of attention required to remember and use your name. This creates a microbond, a thin thread of social connection that, reinforced through the conversation, becomes genuinely significant. The misuse of this principle, of course, is obvious. There's a version of name using that feels performative, almost aggressive. The salesperson who deploys your name every other sentence in a way that feels like a manipulation technique. People are sensitive to the difference between genuine acknowledgement and technique. The goal is not to use someone's name as a tool. It is to use it as an expression of authentic recognition. Natural name use is early, not repeated. It is specific to moments where acknowledgement feels natural, not mechanically distributed throughout the conversation. Done well, it creates a sense of genuine human connection. Done poorly, it creates exactly the opposite, a sense of being worked. Learn names, use them genuinely, and watch how the architecture of a conversation quietly changes. Chapter 6, How Listening Became the Rarest Superpower. We are living in an epidemic of not listening, not because people are rude, although sometimes they are, but because we have built an entire world optimized for broadcasting, for sending, without building any of the infrastructure required for receiving. Social media is a broadcasting machine. Smartphones give us an always available escape from the discomfort of having to sit in silence with another person's words. And our own minds, anxious and overloaded, are often so busy formulating our next response while the other person is still speaking that the words flowing toward us are processed only at the most superficial level. We hear, we do not listen. And this gap, this enormous, culturally invisible gap between hearing and listening, is one of the greatest untapped advantages available to any communicator. Here is what the science shows. When people feel genuinely listened to, something remarkable happens in their brain. Oxytocin, the bonding hormone, is released. Trust increases. Defensiveness decreases. And, counterintuitively, the person who listens is perceived as more intelligent, more credible, and more influential than someone who talked the same amount but did not listen as deeply. We think of listening as a passive half of communication, the thing we do while we wait for our turn to speak. But genuine listening is an active, highly skilled, psychologically sophisticated activity, and people can feel the difference immediately. There are 3 levels of listening that communication researchers have identified, and most people operate almost entirely at the lowest level. Level 1 is transactional listening. You hear the words. You extract the basic informational content. You form a response. This is the level at which most conversations happen most of the time. It is functional but shallow. The listener is internally focused on their own reaction, their own upcoming response, their own agenda. Level 2 is attentive listening. The listener is tracking not just the words, but the meaning beneath the words, the emotion, the subtext, what is being left unsaid. The listener's attention is genuinely on the speaker rather than on themselves. Level 3 is what coaches and therapists call deep listening or empathic listening. At this level, the listener is not only tracking what is said and the emotions beneath it, but is genuinely curious, asking in their own mind, what is the world like from inside this person's experience? What are they really trying to communicate? What do they need to feel understood? At this level, the listener temporarily suspends their own perspective to inhabit the speakers, and the speaker, almost without knowing why, feels profoundly seen. When you operate at level 3, even briefly, conversations transform, walls come down, people tell you things they did not plan to say, connections deepen in ways that take others years to build. This is the first real secret of magnetic communicators. They make you feel, in the moments they are with you, that you are the most interesting person in the room, not by performing enthusiasm, but by being genuinely, curiously interested in what you think, feel, and know. The world is full of people who want to be heard. Almost no one is offering to truly hear them. Become the rare exception, and you become unforgettable. Chapter 7, The Silence That Speaks. There is something that great communicators do that makes other people deeply uncomfortable. They are comfortable with silence, not awkward silence, not dead air, but the deliberate, confident pause, the 2-second breath before response, the moment of stillness after making a point, where the idea is allowed to settle rather than immediately being buried under the next sentence. Most people are terrified of silence in conversation. The moment a pause appears, they rush to fill it with filler words, like, so, with unnecessary qualifications, with the nervous energy of someone who has mistakenly decided that talking and communicating are the same thing. They are not. Silence is one of the most powerful tools in a communicator's arsenal, and the research on why is fascinating. First, silence after a statement signals confidence. When you make a point and then stop, cleanly, without filler, without rushing to soften or expand it, you are broadcasting something important. I am not uncertain about what I just said. I do not need to immediately add more words to make it seem credible. I am comfortable letting the idea stand on its own. This signal is read at a level below conscious processing as authority, as self-assurance, as competence. The person who fills every silence is neurologically signaling anxiety. The person who allows the silence to exist is signaling the opposite. Second, strategic silence in conversation creates an extraordinary psychological dynamic. When you pause before answering a question, not for so long that it becomes strange, but for 2 or 3 deliberate beats, the other person's brain has an interesting response. It interprets the pause as evidence that you are thinking carefully, that your answer will be considered and substantive, and it primes itself to listen more attentively to what comes next. The pause is a setup. What follows it lands with more weight than the same words would have without it. Third, and perhaps most powerfully, silence after you ask someone a question is one of the most effective tools in negotiation and high-stakes conversation that exists. When people are under pressure, when they are trying to formulate an answer, or when they feel the social weight of having to fill silence, they often reveal more than they intended. Information, concessions, the real position beneath the stated one. Experienced negotiators know this. They ask the question, and they wait, comfortably, without the fidgeting or the nodding or the verbal prompting that tells the other person it is acceptable to give only a partial answer. And in that deliberate, unforced silence, the other person often fills the space with exactly what the negotiator most needed to know. Silence is not the absence of communication. It is communication. It is just operating on a frequency that most people do not know how to broadcast on. Chapter 8. The invisible language beneath the words. Picture 2 people in a negotiation. One of them is leaning back in their chair, arms relaxed, body turned slightly toward the other person, a small, confident half-smile on their face. The other is leaning forward, arms crossed, jaws slightly tight, periodically glancing away. Before either of them has said a single word, you already know which one has the power, not because of something mystical, because of something neurological, because your brain, trained by millions of years of primate social evolution, is reading physical signals in real time and translating them into rapid, automatic assessments of status, confidence, and intent. This is the invisible language beneath the words, body language. And despite decades of oversimplification, crossed arms means defensive, pointing feet means attraction. The science is actually far richer and more useful than the pop psychology version suggests. Albert Mehrabian's famous research is frequently misquoted as saying that communication is only 7% words, 55% body language, and 38% tone of voice. This is not precisely what his research showed. It was conducted in specific emotional contexts and has been overgeneralized. But the underlying insight is real and important. In emotionally significant communication, how we say something and how we physically carry ourselves while saying it carries enormous weight, far more weight than most people consciously allocate to it. Let's talk about the 3 most powerful body language signals that communicators can use deliberately. The first is posture. Research from social psychologist Amy Cuddy and subsequent work in her field shows that expansive, open posture, the physical occupation of space, is associated with confidence and status, both by external observers who read it as a signal of power and internally by the person who adopts it. When you stand or sit with your shoulders back, your chest open and your weight settled rather than hunched or contracted, you're broadcasting a clear signal. I am comfortable here. I belong. I am not afraid. The reverse posture, contracted, hunched, shoulders forward, broadcasts the opposite and is read accordingly. The second is eye contact. Eye contact is the primary channel through which humans communicate trust and confidence, and it is regulated by a remarkably fine-grained social instinct. Too little eye contact reads as evasion, shame, or low status. Too much reads as aggression or intensity, but the right amount, warm, steady, broken naturally and without nervous darting, reads as confident engagement, genuine interest, and trustworthiness. Research shows that people who maintain appropriate eye contact in conversation are consistently rated as more intelligent, more credible, and more socially skilled than those who avoid it. This effect is so robust that it has been replicated across cultures with very different social norms around eye contact, and the basic pattern holds. The third and most underestimated is movement speed. The pace at which you move, the speed at which you gesture, turn your head, cross a room, is a powerful status signal that most people never think about. Low status, anxious, subordinate behavior is physically fast. Quick glances, rapid small gestures, the fidgeting of someone who is not sure they have the right to take up time or space. High status, confident behavior is physically slower. Gestures are fuller and more deliberate. Turns of the head are smooth rather than darting. Movement through space is purposeful rather than hurried. This is not about moving slowly for its own sake. It is about the signal that unhurried movement sends, the signal that says, I have time. I am not afraid. I am not rushing to get out of anyone's way. Slow down your physical movement and watch the world begin to respond to you differently. Chapter 9, The Psychology of Voice. Your voice is an instrument, and like any instrument, its power is not intrinsic. It depends entirely on how it is played. Think about the voices that have moved you in your life. The teacher who made you want to come back to class. The leader who made you believe that the impossible was possible. The mentor whose calm certainty in your ability gave you the courage to try. Now think about what those voices sounded like. Not the words they said, the voice itself. The pace, the pitch, the texture, the weight. I would wager that none of those voices were thin, high, rushed, or uncertain. I would wager that they were grounded, full, unhurried, and when they wanted to make a point that mattered, they got quieter, not louder. Voice science is a genuinely fascinating field that most communication training completely ignores. Let us remedy that. The first dimension of voice that signals authority is pace. Research consistently shows that a speaking pace of around 130 to 150 words per minute, measured not in a flat metronomic way, but with variation, is experienced as confident and clear. Much faster than this, and the listener's brain struggles to process meaning. The unconscious signal sent is one of anxiety or sales pressure. Much slower and the attention wanders. But pace variation within a speech or conversation is the real art. Fast pace during description and narrative. Slower pace when emphasizing a critical point. The slow down is the signal. This matters. Pay attention here. The second dimension is pitch. Most people, when nervous or trying to signal competence, raise their vocal pitch. This is a nervous system response. Tension in the muscles around the larynx literally elevates pitch. But the associations are almost universally the opposite of what the nervous speaker intends. Research from Duke University found that executives with deeper, lower-pitched voices led larger companies, were paid more, and were rated as more competent by independent evaluators. Even when the voice was the only thing manipulated, the solution is not to perform an artificial baritone. It is to breathe from the diaphragm, to relax the muscles of the throat and jaw, and to let the voice settle into its natural lower register rather than being pinched upward by tension. The third dimension, and perhaps the most powerful, is the end of sentences. In English, The vocal pitch at the end of the statement determines whether the sentence is perceived as an assertion or a question. When the pitch rises at the end of a declarative sentence, what linguists call uptalk, the statement is neurologically processed by the listener as uncertain, as seeking approval, as not entirely confident in its own content. When the pitch drops at the end of a declarative sentence, firmly, cleanly, without trailing off, the statement is processed as confident, authoritative, and settled. The difference in impact is enormous, and once you hear in your own speech, you cannot unhear it. Chapter 10, The Storyteller's Advantage. Sometime around 300,000 years ago, humans began to do something no other species had ever done. They gathered around fires in the dark, and they told stories, not reports of what happened, not lists of facts. Stories, with characters, with conflict, with a beginning and a turning point, and an ending that meant something. And those stories, shared across the dark, around flames that pushed back the wilderness, were the mechanism by which early humans transmitted everything that mattered, which plants were safe and which were deadly, which strategies had failed in the hunt, what had happened to people who had trusted the stranger from the other tribe. Stories were not entertainment. They were technology. They were the original communication software, and the human brain was built to run them. Modern neuroscience has confirmed what ancient storytellers knew intuitively. When we listen to facts, the two language processing regions of the brain activate. When we listen to a story, something fundamentally different happens. Multiple regions of the brain activate simultaneously. The sensory cortex, the motor cortex, the emotional centers, the areas associated with memory and personal experience. The brain does not process a story as incoming data. It processes it as experience, as something that is happening. This is why you can listen to a presentation filled with statistics and forget 90% of the content within a week, and why a single well-told story from that same presentation can remain vivid in your memory for decades. Powerful communicators use this principle constantly and deliberately. They never make a point with data alone when a story can carry the same point with infinitely more attention and emotional impact. They understand that the human brain is a story-hungry organ, and they feed it accordingly. The structure of a powerful story is not complicated, but it is precise. There is a character, a real, specific, human person, not a type or a demographic or a hypothetical. There is a challenge, something the character wants but cannot easily have, a problem that creates real stakes. There's a turning point, the moment where something shifts, where a decision is made or a realization lands. And there is a meaning, not spelled out didactically, but implicit in the resolution of the tension. The shortest, powerful story in human communication has all four of these elements. It does not need to be long to be transformative. What it needs to be is specific. Vague stories die. Specific stories live. The difference between a woman started a business and struggled, and a 29-year-old single mother named Maria, sitting at her kitchen table at 2 a.m. with $40 in her bank account, decided to write the first email that would become a company valued at $50 million. That difference is everything. The brain can inhabit a specific story. It cannot inhabit a vague one. The communicators who win in the long run are the ones who have built, over time, a personal library of specific, meaningful stories, and who know which story to tell in which moment. Chapter 11. The question is the answer. There's an old saying in sales that the person asking the questions controls the conversation. This is true, but it is a narrow version of a much larger truth. The person asking the right questions controls not just the direction of the conversation, but the thinking of the other person. And controlling thinking, in the most generous, non-manipulative sense, is the foundation of influence. Here is why. When someone tells you something, your brain receives it as input. You process it, you evaluate it, you accept or reject it based on your existing beliefs, your mood, your relationship with the speaker, your defenses. You are essentially a critic in your own internal theater, watching someone else's performance and deciding how much to believe it. But when someone asks you a question, a genuine, well-constructed, thoughtful question, something entirely different happens. You are no longer the critic. You are now the thinker. You are no longer evaluating someone else's conclusions. You are generating your own. And the conclusions we generate ourselves, the answers we arrive at through our own reasoning, carry exponentially more weight than the conclusion someone else told us to adopt. This is the core principle behind the Socratic method, which has been employed by philosophers, therapists, coaches, and educators for 2,500 years. The insight is not new. What is new is the neuroscience that explains exactly why it works. When you ask a well-constructed question, you are directing the other person's attention toward a specific territory of thought. You are inviting them to explore a particular corner of their own experience or reasoning. And whatever they find there, they found it themselves. That discovery belongs to them. And people almost never argue with their own conclusions. This is why the most influential people in any room are often not the ones talking the most. They're the ones asking. They're the ones saying, "What do you think?" And "How did that make you feel?" And "What would happen if?" And they're listening, genuinely, carefully listening to the answers. The quality of your questions reveals the quality of your mind more accurately than any statement you could make. And the act of asking them gives you the most powerful thing communication can offer: genuine understanding of what the other person actually thinks, wants, and needs. Without that understanding, you are communicating in the dark. With it, everything changes. Chapter 12, The Trust Equation. Before a single word of your message lands, before any argument or idea or offer is evaluated on its merits, your listener's brain has already asked and answered a prior question. Can I trust this person? Trust is the invisible prerequisite of communication. Without it, everything you say must climb a hill of skepticism before it can reach understanding. With it, your words flow downhill into open minds. So what determines whether someone trusts you? Social psychologists have studied this extensively, and the findings are more nuanced than the simple list of tips that communication books usually offer. But 4 factors emerge as consistently primary. The first is competence. People trust those who appear to know what they are talking about. This is communicated not primarily through stated credentials, but through the specificity and confidence of what you say. Vague generalities lower perceived competence. Specific, well-reasoned, confident assertions raise it. The second is warmth. Counterintuitively, warmth actually precedes competence in trust evaluation. Research from Harvard Business School, led by Amy Cuddy, found that when people meet someone new, the first question the brain asks is not, "Can this person do what they say?" It is, "Does this person have good intentions toward me?" Warmth is evaluated first. Competence second. A highly capable person who is cold or transactional is trusted less than a moderately competent person who is warm. The third is consistency. Trust is built through pattern matching. When what you say matches what you do, when your tone matches your words, when you behave the same way with the CEO as with the intern, when you keep small commitments as reliably as large ones, the brain builds a predictive model that says, "This person is what they appear to be." That predictability is the foundation of deep trust. The fourth is vulnerability. This one surprises people. We tend to think that showing vulnerability, admitting uncertainty, acknowledging mistakes, revealing genuine feelings, makes us less trustworthy. The research says the opposite. Strategic, appropriate vulnerability, the honest acknowledgement of what you do not know or where you went wrong, dramatically increases both warm perception and credibility. It signals that you are not performing, that what you see is real. The combination of competence and warmth, delivered with consistency and occasional authentic vulnerability, creates the kind of trust that makes people not just listen to what you say, but actually act on it. Chapter 13, What Nobody Teaches You About Persuasion. Let us talk about persuasion, not manipulation. Manipulation is the use of deception or psychological exploitation to move people toward choices that serve the manipulator at the expense of the person being manipulated. Manipulation destroys trust the moment it is discovered, and it is almost always eventually discovered. Genuine persuasion is something entirely different. It is the art of helping people see something true that they had not yet seen, feel something real that they had not yet accessed, or arrive at a decision that genuinely served their interests, even if they were initially resistant to it. Ethical persuasion is one of the highest communication skills that exists, and it operates on a set of psychological principles that are worth understanding deeply. The first is the principle of reciprocity. Robert Cialdini, whose decades of research on influence remain among the most cited in social psychology, identified reciprocity as one of the foundational drivers of human social behavior. We are wired to return what we receive. When someone gives us something, information, help, time, attention, a gift, we experience a genuine and often uncomfortable sense of social obligation to give something back. The most influential people understand this principle and operate accordingly. They give first, generously, and without obvious calculation. They offer value before they ask for anything. They share knowledge, make introductions, provide help without immediately requesting reciprocation. And the social law of reciprocity, operating beneath the conscious awareness of the people they have helped, reliably returns to them in the form of openness, goodwill, and cooperation. The second is the principle of social proof. Humans are a profoundly social species, and our brains are calibrated to monitor the behavior of others as a source of information about what is true, what is valuable, what is safe. When we see that many other people have chosen something, believe something, or trust someone, our own resistance to that choice, belief, or trust decreases substantially. Not because we are intellectually convinced, but because social proof activates a deep evolutionary heuristic. If everyone else is doing it, it is probably safe. Skilled communicators use social proof not deceptively but accurately, referencing genuine testimonials, citing real examples of others who have adopted an idea and benefited from it, demonstrating that the choice they are advocating is not radical or untested but proven. The third principle, persuasion, is perhaps the most important, and it is the one that separates truly sophisticated persuaders from those who merely know the surface techniques. It is the principle of emotional resonance before logical argument. People do not primarily make decisions with their rational minds. They make them with their emotional systems, with a part of the brain that evaluates how something feels, what it says about who they are, whether it connects with what they fundamentally want. And they use the rational mind afterward to construct justifications for what the emotional system has already decided. This is not a criticism of humanity. It is just how the brain works. And understanding it completely reframes the task of persuasion. The rational argument is not the persuasion. It is a permission structure that allows people to follow the emotional pull they already feel. This is why the most persuasive communicators lead with emotion and follow with logic, not with false emotion, not with manipulation, but with a genuine appeal to what the other person truly cares about, truly fears, truly wants, followed by a rational case that shows why this choice, this idea, this direction serves those genuine interests. Logic justifies. Emotion decides. Chapter 14, The Hidden Power of Framing. Two doctors are describing a surgical procedure to their patients. The first doctor says, "This surgery has a 90% survival rate." The second doctor says, "This surgery has a 10% mortality rate." The information is mathematically identical. The numbers describe the same reality. But research consistently shows that patients who hear the first framing are significantly more likely to consent to the procedure than those who hear the second. This is the power of framing, and it is one of the most underestimated forces in human communication. Framing is not spin. It is not deception. It is a recognition that every piece of information can be presented in multiple ways, and that the way information is presented fundamentally shapes how it is evaluated, felt, and acted upon. Nobel Prize-winning psychologist Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky dedicated decades to studying this phenomenon, which they call prospect theory. One of their most famous findings is that people are roughly twice as sensitive to losses as they are to equivalent gains. Losing $50 feels worse than gaining $50 feels good, not by a small margin, by approximately a factor of 2. This asymmetry means that how you frame an option, as something to be gained or something to prevent losing, has enormous influence on how people respond to it. The same product, service, idea, or decision framed as "here's what you gain" creates a different response than "here's what you avoid losing," and the loss framing tend to create more urgency and motivation. But framing operates far beyond gain and loss. It operates in the interpretation of roles. When you refer to yourself as a problem solver rather than consultant, you frame your relationship with the client differently. When you call an argument a different perspective rather than a disagreement, you change the emotional temperature of the conversation. When you describe a setback as a prototype rather than a failure, you change how people process what happened and whether they feel motivated to continue. The words you choose are not just descriptions. They are frames. They define the psychological territory inside which every subsequent thought and feeling occurs. The most skilled communicators are extraordinarily deliberate about their word choices, not because they're trying to deceive anyone, but because they understand that words shape reality, not just the way reality is described, but the way it is experienced and responded to. Chapter 15, How to Make Anyone Feel Important. Here is a social observation that is both obvious and constantly overlooked. The deepest human hunger, more consistent than a hunger for money or success or power, is the hunger to matter, to be seen, to be valued, to know that our existence registers in the consciousness of other people as more than background noise. William James, one of the founders of American psychology, wrote that the deepest principle in human nature is the craving to be appreciated, not to be tolerated, not to be acknowledged, to be genuinely, specifically appreciated. And here's the extraordinary thing about this need. It is almost never fully satisfied in most people's daily lives. Most social interactions are transactional, hurried, and functionally impersonal. People pass through their days feeling mildly unseen, mildly unimportant, not dramatically so, but enough that the rare experience of feeling genuinely valued by another person creates an immediate and powerful bond. Skilled communicators understand this, and they have learned the specific behaviors that create this feeling in other people. The first is genuine, specific compliments, not flattery. Flattery is vague, undirected positive energy that most people can feel is not quite real. It bounces off. A genuine, specific compliment, one that notices a particular quality, decision, or action and names it precisely, lands completely differently. You're great is flattery. The way you handle that difficult question without being defensive showed real emotional maturity. Is a specific observation that says, I was paying attention. I see something real in you. That cannot be faked. And it creates a feeling that is almost physically different from generic praise. The second is a focused follow-up question. When someone shares something with you, a project they're working on, a challenge they're navigating, a story from their life, the most powerful thing you can do is ask a follow-up question that shows you were genuinely listening and genuinely curious to know more. Not a polite, oh, interesting. So what do you do for fun? Pivot, but question that picks up the specific thread they put down and pulls it further. What made you decide to take that approach rather than the obvious one? Or what was the hardest part of that decision for you? When you ask that kind of question, you're saying, through behavior, not words, that what this person said was interesting enough to deserve more than a surface-level response, that their experience and perspective are worth exploring, that they are worth the investment of real curiosity. People will forget what you told them. They will forget what you advised, but they will never forget how you made them feel. Make people feel important, genuinely, specifically, not performatively, and you will never lack for influence, connection, or trust. Chapter 16, The Anatomy of a Difficult Conversation. Every communicator, no matter how skilled, eventually has to have a conversation they do not want to have. The performance review that is not good news. The relationship where something toxic has been allowed to fester too long and now must be addressed. The business partner whose behavior is affecting the team. The parent whose advice has crossed into control. The friend who keeps breaking promises. Difficult conversations are the true test of a communicator, not because they require the most elaborate techniques, but because they require the most courage and the most precision. A mishandled difficult conversation does not just fail to solve the problem. It often makes it worse, adds new damage on top of the existing damage, and leaves both people more defended and less willing to engage with the real issue. The first principle of navigating difficult conversations is to separate the problem from the person. Most people approach difficult conversations the way they approach a conflict, with an adversarial frame. There is a bad actor and a victim. There is someone who did wrong and someone who was wronged. And the conversation is a vehicle for communicating which is which. This adversarial framing almost always produces defensiveness, counteraccusation, and escalation of the conflict rather than a resolution of the underlying problem. The more effective frame, and it must be a genuine reframe, not a rhetorical trick, is a collaborative problem-solving frame. There's a problem. Both people have a stake in solving it. The conversation is not about assigning blame, but about understanding what happened, what each person's experience of it was, and what could be done differently going forward. This frame is disarming in the most literal sense. It removes the other person's reason to defend themselves and invites them instead into partnership. The second principle is to lead with your experience, not your judgment. This is a foundational insight of nonviolent communication, developed by psychologist Marshall Rosenberg. When we begin a difficult conversation with a judgment about the other person's behavior, you were disrespectful, you were careless, you were unfair. We are making a claim about their character or intention that they will almost certainly dispute, and they may be right to dispute it. Our judgment of someone else's behavior is always filtered through our own perceptions, needs, and history. But when we lead with our own experience, when that meeting ended the way it did, I felt dismissed, and I've been struggling to move past that. We are not making a claim about what the other person did or intended. We are making an irrefutable statement about what happened inside us. And irrefutable statements are much harder to argue against, which means the conversation has a much better chance of moving past offense and into genuine dialogue. Lead with experience. Stay curious about theirs. And focus relentlessly on the future rather than relitigating the past. Chapter 17. The Art of Strategic Disagreement. Here's a truth about influence that most people find uncomfortable. Agreeing with everything everyone says is one of the most effective ways to destroy your credibility. Not because people want you to be argumentative, not because disagreement is inherently desirable, but because agreement that seems unconditional, that bends to accommodate whatever position the other person holds, that never pushes back, that validates every idea regardless of quality, is processed by the brain as sycophancy. And sycophancy is one of the most reliably trust-destroying communication behaviors that exists. We know, at some level, when someone is telling us what we want to hear, and when we know that we cannot trust what they say, because if they would agree with a bad idea to avoid conflict, how can we know their agreement with a good idea means anything? Paradoxically, the person who is willing to respectfully disagree, who can say, I actually see this differently and here's why without being combative or dismissive, is trusted more, not less. Their agreement, when it comes, means something. Their counsel is actually worth hearing, because you know they are not simply mirroring you. But disagreement is a skill. Done poorly, it creates unnecessary conflict, triggers defensiveness, and damages relationships. Done well, it builds respect, advances thinking, and deepens connection. The architecture of effective disagreement has three components. First, acknowledge what is right before challenging what is wrong. Find a legitimate ground in the other person's position, not as a manipulation, not as a softener before a blow, but because genuinely engaging with what is strong about an argument demonstrates intellectual honesty, creates the psychological safety for the other person to hear the challenge. Second, make your disagreement specific, not global. That whole approach is wrong, is an attack on identity. I think the timeline in this section doesn't account for the vendor dependency. That concerns me is a specific, substantive challenge that invites engagement rather than defense. Third, make it explicitly collaborative. I want to make sure we get this right. Can I share where my thinking diverges? Is not weakness, it is intelligence. It positions the disagreement as something you are working through together, not as a conflict you are imposing. The willingness to respectfully disagree, expressed with intellectual honesty and collaborative intent, is one of the most powerful signals of genuine leadership. Chapter 18. Reading the Room. Communication does not happen in a vacuum. It happens in a context, a specific emotional, social, and situational context that is constantly shifting, constantly sending signals about what the moment requires. Reading the room is the art of accurately perceiving that context and adjusting your communication accordingly. And it is far rarer than people assume. Most communicators operate from a fixed script. They have their prepared points, their planned approach, their default style, and they deliver that script into whatever room they find themselves in, without truly reading whether the room actually wants what they brought. Great communicators are calibrators. They read people and environments in real time, adjusting pace, tone, level of depth, emotional register, and content as they receive feedback from the room. What does this mean practically? It means reading faces, not in a paranoid, anxious way, but with genuine curiosity. Are people engaged, or are they beginning to drift? Are they nodding with genuine enthusiasm, or the polite but passive nod that means, I am present but not really processing? Is there a tension in the room that has not been named? Is someone holding back something they want to say? It means listening to silences. When you say something and no one responds, not just a thoughtful pause, but a quality of silence that has weight in it. That silence is communication. Something landed that was not comfortable. Something landed that is being processed. Something landed that was wrong in some way. It means tracking energy. Every conversation, every group has an energy, a pace, a level of engagement, a mood. And the most effective communicators do not fight the energy in the room. They start where the energy is and move it deliberately, using vocal variation, pace changes, directional questions, and well-timed stories to bring the energy to where the moment needs it to be. The communicator who reads a room accurately can do more with 5 minutes than someone who ignores a room can do with an hour. Chapter 19, The Language of Leadership. There is a specific way that leaders speak, not a specific accent, not a specific vocabulary, but a specific relationship to language that marks someone as a person others are naturally inclined to follow. And it is learnable. The first characteristic of leadership language is ownership. Leaders take ownership of outcomes, especially negative ones. In their language, we need to do better instead of mistakes were made. I was not clear enough in my communication. Instead of there was a miscommunication. I made the wrong call here, and here is what I'm going to do about it. Instead of the situation was more complex than anticipated. The willingness to take clear, linguistic ownership of responsibility, without hedging, without deflection, without the passive voice escape hatch, is one of the most powerful trust signals in leadership communication. It says, I am accountable. You can count on me to tell you the truth about what is actually happening, including the parts that reflect poorly on me. The second characteristic is directional language. Leaders speak forward, not because they are unrealistic about problems, but because they understand that the job of leadership communication is to orient people toward possibility and action. Here is where we are going and why it matters, rather than here is everything that has gone wrong. Here is what we know, and here is how we will find out what we do not know, rather than we have a lot of uncertainty. This does not mean false optimism. False optimism is a form of leadership cowardice, the refusal to tell people the truth because the truth is uncomfortable. Genuine directional language acknowledges reality fully and then pivots to the question that actually matters. What do we do about it? The third characteristic is inclusion, the royal we in leadership language, not used to avoid personal accountability, but used to genuinely signal collective identity and shared purpose, creates cohesion. This is what we are building together. Instead of, here is the plan I need you to execute, changes how people experience their relationship to the work. Leaders use language to create belonging, and belonging is one of the... Chapter 20, How Words Create Worlds. Language is not just a tool for describing reality. Language creates reality. This is not a philosophical abstraction. It is a neurological and social fact with profound practical implications for every communicator. Consider how differently a team performs when its leader describes a challenge as a threat we need to defend against versus an opportunity that nobody else has yet recognized. The situation is identical. The words are different, but the words shape the cognitive and emotional frame through which the team perceives and responds to the situation, which means they literally change what happens, what the team attempts, what they believe is possible, whether they approach the problem with fear or curiosity. Or consider the research on medical outcomes and language. Studies show that patients who are told this medication will help you feel better recover measurably faster than patients given the same medication and told, we are not sure if this will work. The placebo and nocebo effects, where expectations shaped by language changes actual physiological outcomes, are among the most robust findings in medicine. Or consider education. When teachers are told falsely that certain students have unusual intellectual potential, those students show measurably greater growth within a year, because the teacher's language, tone, expectations, and attention, all shaped by what they believe about the student, create a learning environment in which more is expected and therefore more is achieved. This effect, the Pygmalion effect, has been replicated in workplaces, military training, and athletic development. Language shapes expectation. Expectation shapes reality. This means that the words you choose are never neutral. They are always doing something to the world, to the people around you, to the possibilities that exist or that fail to exist because no one spoke them into being. The communicator who understands this does not choose words carelessly. They understand that language is a technology through which human beings build the future, and they use it with the care and intention that any powerful technology demands. Chapter 21, The Charisma Code. There is a myth about charisma that keeps enormous numbers of people from developing it. The belief that it is innate, that some people are born with it and most people are not, and the only thing to be done is to admire from a distance and accept that the gods of personality simply pass you over. This myth is not just wrong. It is demonstrably, measurably wrong. And dismantling it may be one of the most important things this audiobook does for you. Research led by Olivia Fox-Caban, drawing on neuroscience, social psychology, and behavioral science, identifies 3 components that consistently create the experience of charisma in observers: presence, power, and warmth. And all 3 of them are not personality traits. They are behaviors. They are states. They are things people do, not things people permanently are. Presence, as we have discussed, is the quality of being fully in this moment with this person without divided attention. It is a felt experience of being genuinely met by another human being. It is rare enough that when people encounter it, they experience it as remarkable, almost magnetic, but it is not a gift. It is a discipline. The discipline of returning attention to the present moment whenever it wanders. The discipline of putting the phone away. The discipline of choosing to be here rather than already somewhere else. Power, in charisma terms, is not force or dominance. It is the quality of someone who could influence their environment if they chose to, and who is comfortable with that capacity. It is communicated through posture, pace, vocal tone, and the settled confidence of someone who does not need external validation to feel secure. And it can be cultivated deliberately through the physical practices of expansive posture, controlled breathing, and movement speed we discussed earlier. Warmth is genuine positive regard for the other person, not performed, not strategic, genuine. And this is perhaps the most interesting of the 3 components, because researchers find that warmth cannot be effectively faked for long. People are very good at detecting inauthenticity in emotional expression, even when they cannot identify the specific signals. What actually works is developing a genuine positive regard for other people, which begins with curiosity about their inner world, respect for their perspective, and the belief that they matter. The good news is that genuine curiosity and genuine warmth can be cultivated. They are not fixed traits any more than charisma itself is a fixed trait. They are practiced orientations toward other human beings. Charisma is not something you're born with. It is a set of behaviors that create a specific experience in others, and behaviors can be learned. Chapter 22, Navigating Power Dynamics. Every conversation exists within a power dynamic. Not every dynamic is extreme, and not everyone requires careful navigation. But understanding how power operates in conversation and how to navigate it gracefully, whether you have more or less of it than the person you are speaking with, is a skill that profoundly affects your outcomes. Power in conversation is not the same as formal authority. The CEO has formal authority over the employee. But in a given conversation, the person with the clearest thinking, the most useful information, the most emotional composure, or the most compelling story can carry communicative power regardless of title. Understanding this is liberating. It means that power in conversation is dynamic, not fixed. It shifts as the conversation develops, and skilled communicators know how to navigate those shifts. When you are speaking with someone who has more formal authority than you, a senior leader, a major client, a powerful negotiating counterpart, there's a common error pattern that undermines your effectiveness immediately. It is a pattern of excessive deference, over-explanation, over-justification, the verbal behavior of someone who is apologizing for taking up space. The irony is that this behavior, intended to manage the power differential, actually amplifies it. Because the senior person's brain reads the signals of over-deference as low-status communication and treats it accordingly, you are more likely to be dismissed, talked over, or simply not taken seriously. The alternative is what researchers call high-status communication, not arrogance, not presumption, but the quiet confidence of someone who believes their perspective has value and communicates accordingly. Clear statements, direct eye contact, the willingness to respectfully hold a position under pressure, the absence of unnecessary qualifiers. When you communicate as though your perspective deserves to be heard, you are far more likely to be in rooms where it is. And when you hold formal authority, the trap goes in the other direction. The temptation to communicate from positional power rather than genuine persuasion, the because I said so frame, the closed door of authority, and the perverse result. The more you lean on authority, the more you undermine it. People comply with authority. They are persuaded by respect. The greatest leaders are almost never the ones in the room who remind you most often that they are in charge. Chapter 23. The Psychology of Negotiation. Every conversation where two or more people have different needs or positions is, at some level, a negotiation. The word carries business and legal weight that makes people think of high-stakes deal tables and teams of lawyers. But negotiation is what happens every time a couple decides where to eat dinner, every time a parent navigates what a child will agree to do, every time an employee discusses their responsibilities with a manager. Understanding the psychology of negotiation is not about becoming ruthless or strategic in a transactional sense. It is about understanding what actually drives human decision-making under conditions of competing interests, and using that understanding to reach outcomes that are genuinely better for everyone involved. The first and most critical insight from negotiation research is a distinction between positions and interests. A position is what someone says they want. An interest is why they want it. The underlying need, value, or goal that the stated position is an attempt to satisfy. In any negotiation, positions often appear to be in direct conflict. My position is that I want the project finished by Thursday. Your position is that it cannot be done before Monday. But beneath those positions are interests that may be far more compatible than the positions suggest. My interest is that I have a client presentation Friday morning and need to be prepared. Your interest is that rushing the work will compromise quality in a way that damages the reputation of both of us. Now, we are in the same problem together. Now, there are multiple possible solutions. A Thursday afternoon delivery of the key components, a preliminary brief I can use Friday, a conversation with the client about adjusting the timeline, that neither of us could see when we were stuck arguing about Thursday versus Monday. This is why every skilled negotiator spends more time asking questions to understand the other party's interests than making arguments for their own position. Position arguing creates deadlock. Interest exploring creates possibility. The second insight is that emotion is not the enemy of negotiation. It is the most important data point in it. The other party's emotional state, their fear, their pride, their need to feel respected, their anxiety about a particular outcome, is telling you something critical about what they actually need from this negotiation. And if you can address those emotional needs, often without any substantive concession, you remove the biggest obstacles to agreement. This is why the best negotiators in the world are also consistently some of the best listeners. They are listening for emotion beneath the words. And they know that when someone feels genuinely heard and respected, the deal often becomes possible. Chapter 24. The Secret Life of Small Talk. Most people approach small talk the way they approach a tedious but necessary chore. It is a conversational equivalent of filling out paperwork, something to get through before you can get to the actual content of the interaction. This is a profound misunderstanding of what small talk actually is and what it actually does. Small talk is the warm-up. It is a social weather system that tells both parties something critical before the substantive conversation begins. Is this a safe environment? Can I trust this person? Is there the kind of connection here that makes meaningful exchange possible? When people skip small talk, when they drive straight into agenda items and business content without the few minutes of interpersonal calibration that small talk provides, they are starting the substantive conversation in a colder room. The trust has not been warmed up. The connection has not been established, and the content that follows carries a heavier burden because it is trying to do its job in an environment that has not been prepared to receive it. Research in organizational psychology confirms this. Teams that begin meetings with brief personal connection, even 90 seconds of genuine human exchange, produce measurably better collaborative outcomes than teams that go straight to the agenda. But the real secret of small talk is this. It is not about the topics. It is about the energy. When you talk about the weather or sports or the traffic, you're not exchanging information about the weather or sports or the traffic. You are exchanging emotional signals. You are calibrating. You're finding out whether this person is approachable, whether they are warm, whether they have a kind of ease with human connection that suggests they can be trusted. The actual content is almost irrelevant. The emotional texture of the exchange is everything. This is why the most effective small talkers are not people who are good at talking. They are people who are good at making others feel at ease. They find the one thing the other person is genuinely happy to talk about, and they invite them to talk about it. They listen. They laugh. They give the other person the experience of being an interesting conversationalist. And in doing so, they become unforgettable. The best conversationalists are the people who make you feel like you are the best conversationalist. Chapter 25, The Confidence That Cannot Be Faked. We have come a long way already. We have explored the neuroscience of communication under pressure, the body language of authority, the vocal signals of confidence, the architecture of trust, and the hidden principles of persuasion. And throughout, a single concept keeps appearing at the center of all of it. Confidence, not the performed version, not the bravado of someone who is trying to appear confident because they are afraid that their fear will show. Not the shallow confidence of the person who has memorized the right moves but feels hollow underneath them. Real confidence, the kind that does not need to announce itself, the kind that is detectable in a room before a word is spoken, the kind that does not rise and fall based on whether the last interaction went well or badly. Where does this confidence come from? The answer is not where most people look for it. Most people look for confidence in external feedback, in approval, in success, in the validation of others. And the confidence they find there is real but unstable. It is confidence that is contingent on outcomes, which means it is confidence that is fragile exactly when it is needed most, in the moments of high stakes, when outcomes are uncertain and approval is unavailable. Genuine confidence, the kind that shows up consistently under pressure without the need for recent validation, comes from a different source entirely. It comes from deep self-knowledge, from knowing with genuine clarity and without self-deception who you are, what you value, what you are capable of, and what you stand for, from having sat with your own fears and limitations and come to peace with them, not by pretending they do not exist, but by understanding that they do not define you, from having a relationship with yourself that does not require the constant input of external approval to remain stable. This kind of confidence is not the absence of fear. Truly confident people are afraid sometimes. They feel nervous. They feel uncertain. They feel the full range of human emotion in difficult situations. But their identity does not depend on the outcome. Their sense of who they are does not rise and fall with the approval of the room. And that independence, that psychological freedom from the need for external validation, is what reads, in every room and in every interaction, as magnetic confidence. It cannot be faked because it is not a performance. It is the relationship with yourself. Building it is the work of a lifetime, but it begins with a single question. Who am I when no one is watching? And who do I want to be? The 5 seconds between this revelation and the next will define the direction of everything that follows. Because here is what I have not yet told you. Everything we have explored in these first 25 chapters, the neuroscience, the body language, the voice, the storytelling, the trust, the persuasion, all of it rests on a single foundation, a foundation that most communication books never examine, a principle so fundamental that its presence or absence determines whether every other technique works or fails. And that principle has nothing to do with what you say or how you say it. It has to do with what you believe about yourself, about other people, and about what communication is actually for. In part 2, we're going to go there. We are going to examine the deepest architecture of influence, the advanced psychology of charisma and leadership, the counterintuitive secrets of the world's most persuasive communicators, and the single shift in mindset that, once made, changes every conversation you will ever have for the rest of your life. The most important revelation of this entire audiobook is waiting for you. There is a belief that lives quietly at the center of every powerful communicator's psychology. It is not a technique. It is not a method. It cannot be found in a list of tips or distilled into a 3-step framework. but it underlies every single thing that makes some people magnetic and others forgettable. That belief is this: other people are worth understanding, not worth impressing, not worth convincing, not worth managing or maneuvering or strategically influencing, worth understanding. When this belief is genuinely held, not performed, not strategically adopted, but real, everything about a person's communication changes. The questions they ask become more penetrating because they're actually curious about the answers. The listening they do becomes deeper because they actually care what the other person thinks. The warmth they project becomes genuine because it is rooted in real positive regard rather than a desire to be perceived as warm. And ironically, paradoxically, the communicator who is most genuinely focused on understanding other people rather than on being impressive to them is almost always the more impressive one in the room. Because everyone, everywhere, in every kind of interaction, is hungry to be understood. And the person who offers that rare gift of genuine understanding creates a bond that no technique can manufacture. This is a foundation. Everything in Part 2 is built on it. Let us continue. Chapter 26. Advanced Emotional Intelligence. Emotional intelligence has become one of the most discussed concepts in leadership and communication over the past 30 years, ever since psychologist Daniel Goleman brought the science of EQ to mainstream awareness in the mid-1990s. But the popular understanding of it has been flattened and simplified in ways that obscure its most powerful and actionable dimensions. Most people understand emotional intelligence as the ability to be nice, to be warm and approachable, to not get too angry in meetings or cry in negotiations. And while emotional regulation is certainly part of the picture, treating EQ as a synonym for being pleasant sells the concept catastrophically short. At its most sophisticated, emotional intelligence is a complex set of perceptual and regulatory skills that operate in real time during communication. Let us unpack the 4 dimensions that matter most. The first is emotional perception. This is the ability to accurately read emotions in others, not just the obvious ones, but the subtle and contradictory ones. The smile that does not reach the eyes, the enthusiasm that has a hollow quality to it, the person who says, "I'm fine with this," in a tone that carries a note of something that is definitely not fine. Most people, absorbed in their own internal monologue, miss these signals almost entirely. Skilled emotional perceivers catch them and treat them as important information rather than background noise. The second is emotional facilitation. This is a counterintuitive ability to use emotion strategically, not in a manipulative sense, but in the sense of understanding which emotional states support which kinds of thinking. Research shows that mild positive effect enhances creative, expansive thinking. Mild negative effect, interestingly, enhances detail-oriented, critical thinking. When a skilled communicator wants to brainstorm and explore possibilities, they create conditions for warmth and levity. When they want to rigorously audit a plan, they do not artificially inflate enthusiasm. They allow and even invite the sober, critical energy that produces thorough analysis. The third dimension is emotional understanding. This goes beyond reading emotions in the moment to understanding why they exist, what triggers which emotions in which people, how emotions transform into one another over time, how pride, when its source is threatened, can very quickly become anger, and how that anger, when it cannot find external expression, can turn inward into depression. This narrative understanding of emotional dynamics allows skilled communicators to navigate and sometimes diffuse emotional situations that have escalated because no one understood the path they were traveling. The fourth dimension is emotional management, not suppression. That is a recipe for eruption, but regulation, the ability to acknowledge a strong emotion, understand what it is telling you, and choose how to respond to it rather than simply being driven by it. The person who can feel fear and still speak clearly, who can feel anger and still listen, who can feel the full human range of emotion without losing capacity to think and communicate effectively. Emotional intelligence at this level is not about being emotionally flat. It is about having a sophisticated, honest, and disciplined relationship with your own emotional life and the emotional lives of the people around you. Chapter 27. The Neuroscience of Connection. Something happens in the brain when two people are in genuine, deep conversation that is so remarkable that when researchers first documented it, Many in the scientific community found it difficult to believe. The phenomenon is called neurocoupling, and what it describes is this. When a speaker tells a story with genuine emotion and authenticity, and a listener is fully and deeply engaged, the patterns of neural activity in the speaker's brain are literally mirrored in the listener's brain. Not similar activity, not parallel activity, matching activity, the same regions, firing in the same sequence, in two separate skulls. The listener's brain, in the most literal neurological sense, experiences what the speaker is experiencing. This is the science behind empathy. This is why you wince when you see someone stub their toe. Why you feel something in your chest when a character in a film faces devastating loss. Why the right story, told in the right way, can make a room full of strangers feel the same thing at the same time. Human brains are wired for resonance, for attunement, for the extraordinary biology of shared experience. And the implications for communication are profound. When you speak with genuine authenticity, when you tell a real story about a real experience with real emotion, you are not just transmitting information. You are literally inducing a neural experience in the other person. You are giving them the felt sense of what you experienced, not just a description of it. And felt experiences change minds and move people to action in ways that mere information never can. This is also why inauthenticity is so deeply felt. When someone is performing rather than genuinely expressing, when the emotion in their words does not match the emotion in their brain, the neural coupling does not fully activate. The listener's brain, exquisitely sensitive to authentic versus performed emotional signals, does not fire in resonance. It holds back. The connection is not made. The words land but do not move. You cannot fake your way into neural coupling. What you can do is practice the courage of genuine expression, the willingness to be real. In a world that strongly incentivizes performance, is one of the rarest and most powerful communication gifts a person can develop. Chapter 28, The Power of Vulnerability in Leadership. There is a paradox at the heart of leadership communication that most leaders spend years learning the hard way. The more tightly you guard your own humanity, the more you protect yourself behind a facade of certainty, strength, and impenetrability, the less effective your communication becomes. And the more you are willing to be genuinely, selectively human in front of the people you lead, to admit uncertainty, to name a fear, to acknowledge mistake clearly and without spin, the more your influence grows. This seems counterintuitive. We have inherited a model of leadership that prizes invulnerability, the stoic commander who never shows doubt, the executive who projects absolute certainty even in a storm, the mentor who seems to have always known exactly what to do. And this model creates a specific kind of follower, one who performs compliance while privately doubting whether the leader has any real understanding of what the situation demands. Because humans are exquisitely sensitive to genuine expertise versus performed certainty, and we know the difference, even when we cannot articulate what we are detecting. Brené Brown's research on vulnerability in leadership, which became one of the most widely cited bodies of work in organizational psychology, demonstrates something that feels almost radical in the context of traditional leadership culture. The leaders who are most trusted by their teams are those who communicate with what she calls wholehearted authenticity, who are willing to be seen, including in their uncertainty and fallibility. Why? Because trust is not built by the demonstration of perfection. It is built by the demonstration of honesty. And perfection is never honest. When a leader says, "I made the wrong call here, and here's what I am learning from it," they are not undermining their authority. They are establishing something more valuable than authority: genuine credibility. They are demonstrating that they can be trusted to tell the truth about what is happening. And in a world where people desperately need to be able to trust that their leaders will tell them the truth, that demonstration is worth more than any display of manufactured certainty. Vulnerability in leadership communication is not weakness. It is the ultimate signal of strength. The strength of someone who does not need a perfect image to feel secure. Chapter 29, The Psychology of Influence Without Pressure. There is a version of persuasion that works short-term and destroys long-term. It is a persuasion of pressure, of urgency artificially manufactured, of social pressure applied through obligation or shame, of a high-stakes close that leaves someone feeling maneuvered into a decision they are not fully comfortable with. And there's a version of persuasion that builds the most durable influence available to a human communicator. It is a persuasion of insight, the art of helping someone see something they had not yet seen, understand something they had not yet understood, or feel something they had not yet allowed themselves to feel, in such a way that the shift comes from inside them. This is sometimes called motivational interviewing in therapeutic contexts, where it was developed to help people change deeply entrenched behaviors, not through confrontation or instruction, but through a specific kind of guided self-discovery. The technique was originally created by psychologists William Miller and Stephen Rolnick, and has since been shown to be effective far beyond clinical settings, in leadership, in sales, in parenting, in any context where one person is trying to help another person move toward a change they may be ambivalent about. The core insight is this: ambivalence is a natural state of most humans in most decisions. We want to change, and we want to stay the same. We want the new opportunity, and we are afraid of what we would have to give up to take it. We want to improve the relationship, and we are tired of being the one who always has to try first. Most communication that tries to persuade treats this ambivalence as an obstacle, something to overcome, to push past, to argue away. And ambivalence, when it is pushed, does a very interesting thing. It pushes back. It digs in. It becomes more resistant, not less, because the person now has an additional reason to hold their position, to protect themselves from the feeling of being pressured. The communication approach that actually moves ambivalent people, that resolves internal tension rather than triggering more of it, works in exactly the opposite way. It acknowledges and explores the ambivalence. It asks about both sides. It creates space for the person to hear themselves articulate why change might matter, without telling them that it should. It trusts that when someone hears themselves make the case for change in their own words, that case is more compelling than anything an outside communicator could say. The most powerful persuasion feels less like being convinced and more like arriving at clarity. To Chapter 30. How to command a room. Let us take you into a specific scenario. You are about to address a group of people. It might be 10 people in a conference room or 10,000 people in an auditorium. The dynamic is the same. Before you speak the first word, you have a choice, actually a series of choices, that will determine whether this audience is with you or merely present in the same room. The first choice is pace of entry. This is almost never discussed in communication training, but experienced public speakers know it instinctively. When you walk to front of a room, or step onto a stage, or stand up at a table, the pace of your movement is the first piece of data the audience receives about how seriously to take you. People who rush to the front, who are visibly anxious to get it over with, are communicating something before they open their mouth. People who walk to the front deliberately, without hurrying, who take a breath and look at the audience for a moment before speaking, are communicating something entirely different. I am ready to be here, and I am giving you a moment to be ready for me. That 2-second pause before the first word is not awkward. It is command. Do not fill it. The second choice is your opening sentence. There is a structure that the human brain has been conditioned by decades of bad presentation openings to expect. Good morning, my name is, and today I'm going to talk to you about. This structure is so familiar and so uninteresting that the brain has learned to check out during it. It is a vocal equivalent of the skip ad button. Great presentation openings refuse this structure entirely. They begin in the middle of something. A question, a provocative statement, a brief, specific scene. Something that creates the feeling, this is already interesting. I need to pay attention. 3 years ago, we almost lost everything we had built. And the reason we almost lost it was something none of us saw coming. Something that, once I show it to you, you'll see in every conversation you have from this day forward. In 45 words, the audience has a mystery, a personal story, and a promise of revelation. They are in. The third choice, sustained throughout, is distribution of attention. Inexperienced speakers either look at one person or look at a spot above everyone's heads, or scan so rapidly that no one feels actually seen. Skilled presenters distribute genuine eye contact across the room, not mechanically, not like a lighthouse sweeping, but organically, making genuine micro-connections with individuals around the room in a way that makes everyone feel intermittently met. When an audience member feels personally seen by a speaker, even for 2 seconds, something shifts in their relationship to the presentation. They stop being a passive observer and become an engaged participant. And engaged participants give better energy back. which makes the speaker better, which makes the audience more engaged. The whole thing accelerates. You do not perform for a room. You connect with it, person by person. Chapter 31, The Art of the Memorable Message. Abraham Lincoln was a lawyer, which meant that one of the core skills he developed over years of practice was the ability to distill a complex argument to its essential point. His law partner, William Herndon, described him as someone who could take a complicated legal argument, examine it from every angle, and then arrive at what Herndon called a nub, the single sentence that contained the core of the matter. This capacity to find the nub, to take complexity and distill it to its essential communicable core, is one of the rarest and most valuable communication skills in existence. Most people, when they have something important to say too much, not because they are incapable of brevity, but because complexity feels safer than simplicity. More words feel like more thorough thinking. More caveats feel like more intellectual honesty. More subpoints feel like a more complete picture. But the research on message retention tells a different story. The human brain's working memory can hold approximately 7 items, plus or minus 2, in short-term storage. Once that capacity is exceeded, not just the excess items, but often the core items are lost in the cognitive noise. The audience remembers nothing because everything competed with everything else for their limited attentional bandwidth. The messages that endure, the ones people recall in conversations weeks after presentation, the ones that spread through organizations because people repeat them to each other, the ones that actually change thinking and behavior, are almost always simple, not simplistic, not dumbed down, but clear, concentrated, and memorable. Chip and Dan Heath, in their research on message stickiness, found that the most memorable messages share a specific set of characteristics. They are concrete rather than abstract. They deal in specific, tangible, imaginable things rather than concepts. They are unexpected. They violate an assumption the audience already holds, creating the curiosity gap that demands resolution. They are emotional. They connect with something the audience actually cares about. And they are credible. They provide enough evidence to be believed without requiring a full evidence review. The test of a truly memorable message is whether someone who is not in the room can understand and repeat it after hearing it once from someone who was. If the answer is yes, you've found the nub. If the answer is no, keep distilling. Chapter 32, Reading Between the Lines. Words carry meaning. But the full meaning of what people are trying to communicate is almost never contained entirely within the words themselves. There is a layer beneath the language, in the emphasis, the pacing, the facial microexpressions, the emotions that color the voice, the things that are conspicuously not said, that contain some of the most important information in any conversation. Learning to read between the lines is not about becoming paranoid or reading suspicious motives into innocent statements. It is about becoming more fully literate in the complete language of human communication, which is always operated on multiple tracks simultaneously. Linguists call one of these tracks the pragmatic layer, the implied meaning beneath the literal one. When someone says, "It would be great if you could get that to me by Thursday," they are not making an observation about what would be great. They are making a request, possibly a strong one. The words are describing a hypothetical positive outcome. The pragmatic meaning is a directive, and the gap between the literal and the pragmatic is where misunderstanding lives. Most communication breakdowns, in workplaces, in relationships, in negotiations, do not occur because the words were not heard. They occur because the words were taken literally when they meant something else, or taken as something else when they meant exactly what was said, or understood at the explicit level while the emotional subtext, which was the real communication, was completely missed. Skilled communicators read all the tracks. They notice the difference between the colleague who says, "Sure, that works," briskly and moves on, and the colleague who says, "Sure, that works," with a small pause before the first word and a slight flattening in the voice. The words are identical. The communication is not. They track what is not said as carefully as what is. In negotiation, a counterpart who answers a specific question about terms with a question about process is communicating something important through their refusal to directly answer. In a relationship conversation, the topic that keeps getting redirected away from is often the topic that matters most. Learning to listen to everything, the words, the tone, the pace, the pauses, The redirections, the facial signals, the physical responses, is what separates an adequate communicator from a genuinely masterful one. Chapter 33, The Language of Empathy. There's a word that appears in most communication training around difficult conversations and relationships, and that word is empathy. And it is discussed so frequently and so vaguely that it has started to lose precision. It has become a kind of soothing gesture rather than a specific skill. So let us get specific. Empathy in communication is not the same as sympathy. Sympathy is feeling for someone, the experience of observing their pain and responding with your own emotional reaction to it. I feel so terrible about what you're going through. Sympathy is not without value, but it centers the sympathizer's emotional experience rather than the other person's. Empathy is feeling with someone, the experience of temporarily setting aside your own perspective and inhabiting theirs enough to genuinely understand what their experience is like from inside, not what you would feel in their situation, what they feel in their situation. And these are often different things. Empathic communication, translated into language, is specific and behavioral. It names the emotion accurately. It validates the legitimacy of the emotion, not the action it might have led to, not necessarily the interpretation that generated it, but the feeling itself. And it does not immediately rush to fix, advise, or reframe. That last point is where most people, especially those who genuinely care and want help, go wrong. The instinct, when someone we care about is in pain, is to move toward solution as quickly as possible. What you should do is, or try not to think about it that way, or it could be worse. We want to take the pain away. But the person in pain, before they want a solution, needs something more fundamental. They need to feel that someone actually sees and acknowledges the reality of what they are experiencing. The moment when empathy is communicated accurately, when someone feels genuinely understood in their specific pain, not generically consoled, is one of the most powerful experiences in human interaction. Walls come down. The emotional charge of the pain decreases, paradoxically, because it is no longer being held in isolation, and the relationship deepens in ways that years of pleasant, pain-free interaction never achieve. Empathy is not softness. It is one of the most demanding and most powerful communication skills available to any human being. Chapter 34, High-Stakes Communication Under Pressure. Some of the most important conversations of your life will happen under conditions of maximum pressure. Your performance review after a difficult year, the pitch to the investor who could change everything, the conversation with the partner where the relationship is genuinely at stake, the moment in the courtroom, the boardroom, the emergency room where everything depends on your ability to think and speak clearly while every instinct in your body is screaming fight or flight. Most communication training leaves you completely unprepared for this reality. It teaches you how to communicate when you are calm, when you have time to prepare, when the stakes are manageable. It does not address what to do when the floor falls away and everything you practice disappears in the rush of cortisol. Let us address it directly. The first principle of high-stakes communication under pressure is to slow everything down before it needs to speed up. Not literally. The conversation cannot be put on pause while you collect yourself, but internally, when pressure rises, most people's communication instinct is to rush, to fill the silence, to respond immediately, as if the delay itself is evidence of incompetence. This instinct is almost always counterproductive. A rush response in a high-stakes conversation is rarely your best response, and the 2 or 3 seconds required to take a genuinely slow breath, to collect your thoughts, and to begin your response with intention rather than reflex costs you almost nothing in perception of the other person, but gains you everything in the quality of what you say. Practice the deliberate pause until it becomes a reflex that overrides a panic reflex. In a crisis of communication, the pause is not weakness. It is a thing between you and a mistake you cannot take back. The second principle is to anchor to a preparation you have already done. The reason top athletes, performers, and public speakers can function at their highest level under the most extreme pressure conditions is not that they feel no pressure. It is that they have done the preparation so thoroughly that the core behaviors they need, the physical positioning, the vocal technique, the structural framework of their message, have been encoded into procedural memory. They do not need to consciously think about those things, because they are already automatic. Their conscious attention is free to deal with what is happening in real time. Over-prepare for the conversations that matter most. Prepare your core message until you could say it while half asleep. Prepare for the 3 most likely challenges to that message. Prepare your physical state, the breathing, the posture, so that the confident body position is already the default position, not something you have to consciously remember to adopt. When the pressure comes, the preparation is still there, already loaded, and your job in the moment becomes much simpler. Trust the work, stay present, and listen. Chapter 35, The Ethics of Influence. We need to spend a moment here, not long, but honest, in a territory that most books about communication either avoid or treat too lightly. Every principle in this audiobook is a tool. Tools can be used to build and to destroy. The psychology of persuasion can be used to help people see what is genuinely true and genuinely good for them, or it can be used to move people toward choices that serve the persuader at the expense of the person being persuaded. The architecture of trust can be used to build genuine relationships, or it can be used to manufacture the appearance of trust as a prelude to exploitation. The difference is intention, and intention is not just a moral consideration. It is a practical one. Influence that is genuinely ethical, that genuinely seeks to help the other person, that operates in their real interest as well as your own, that is transparent about its own motivations, is sustainable. It builds relationships and reputations over time. It compounds. Each person who experiences it becomes not just a transaction completed, but an ambassador who talks about you in rooms you have never entered. Influence that exploits trust, manipulates emotion, or deceives, even when it produces a short-term result, erodes the foundation of communication itself. And because humans are exquisitely sensitive to inauthenticity, to the gap between projected warmth and genuine intention, it is almost always eventually detected. And when it is detected, the damage is far greater than whatever was gained. The most influential communicators in history, the ones whose impact extended beyond their own lifetimes, whose words are still quoted, and whose movements still shape the world, were not manipulators. They were people of genuine conviction who had mastered the skill of expressing that conviction in ways that others could receive and be moved by. Speak truth. Speak in the genuine interest of the people you are communicating with. Use every skill in this audiobook in service of that intention. And the influence you build will not just be powerful, it will be lasting. Chapter 36, The Conversational Power of Specificity. There is a distinction that separates speakers who are intellectually respected from speakers who are merely liked, and it comes down to a single quality: the specificity of their thinking. Vague language is the single most reliable signal of unclear thinking. When someone says we need to do better without specifying what better means, by how much, measured how, achieved through what actions, they may feel like they have communicated something. They have not. They have emitted words that have the shape of a message but not its substance. Specific language, by contrast, demonstrates that thinking has actually occurred. Our customer satisfaction rating dropped 4 points last quarter, specifically in the post-purchase support category, and the exit survey data suggests the bottleneck is response time in the first 24 hours. This is not more words. It is actual thought expressed in language, and the person speaking it is instantly perceived as more credible, more competent, and more trustworthy than the person who said, "We need to do better in customer service." This principle extends beyond professional contexts. In any conversation, the person who is specific, who refers to actual events, actual people, actual numbers, actual moments, is perceived as more honest, more intelligent, and more worth listening to than the person who speaks in generalities. And here's the thing about specificity that most people miss. It also creates emotional impact in ways that abstraction never can. Many people struggle with anxiety, registers as information. Sarah woke up at 3 a.m. for the 4th time that week, lying in the dark, heart already racing before she was fully conscious, the familiar dread already building in her chest before she even remembered what she was dreading. That registers as experience. The specific details do not just communicate more clearly, they transport. They allow the listener's brain to actually inhabit the scenario rather than merely conceive it. The single easiest upgrade any communicator can make, beginning today, beginning in the next conversation, is to replace every vague generalization with a specific example, not as a performance, as a practice of genuine intellectual precision. Be specific about everything, all the time. Chapter 37. The communication habits of exceptional leaders. Over the past several decades, researchers in organizational psychology have studied what distinguishes the communication habits of leaders who consistently produce extraordinary results and extraordinary loyalty from leaders who are equally intelligent and equally well-resourced but produce only ordinary outcomes. The findings are consistent enough across contexts and cultures to constitute something close to a universal pattern. Exceptional leaders listen more than they talk, not in a performative way, not the theatrical head nod that signals listening while the mind is clearly elsewhere, but in a genuine, curious, functionally active way. They ask questions that demonstrate they have actually processed what was said. They take time before responding. They sometimes change their mind based on what they heard, and they say so. Exceptional leaders communicate context, not just instruction. They tell people not just what to do, but why it matters, how this task connects to this goal, which connects to this mission, which connects to this vision of what we are all trying to build together. Research from Wharton Business School found that workers who understood the meaning and purpose of their tasks performed at levels measurably superior to workers who received identical tasks without context. The additional information changed not just their motivation, but the quality of their thinking about how to approach the work. Exceptional leaders give credit specifically and publicly, and take responsibility specifically and privately. They say, Alex's idea was the key to solving this problem in front of the whole team. And they say, I made the wrong call, and here's what I'm doing about it in a one-on-one conversation. This pattern, which requires genuine generosity and genuine accountability, builds teams of extraordinary loyalty and initiative. And perhaps most importantly, exceptional leaders are honest about what they do not know. They do not perform certainty when they are genuinely uncertain. They say, I don't have the answer to that yet, and I think it's one of the most important questions we need to be working on, rather than offering a confident-sounding answer that is actually a guess dressed up as certainty. And in doing so, they create the psychological safety within which their teams can also be honest about what they do not know, which is the only environment in which real problems can be identified and actually solved. Leadership communication is not about broadcasting commands from the top. It is about creating the conditions in which collective intelligence can emerge. Chapter 38. The silence between the notes. Miles Davis, arguably the most influential jazz musician of the 20th century, was asked once what he believed was the secret of his extraordinary musical impact. His answer has stayed with musicians and communicators ever since. He said, "It is not the notes you play. It is the notes you do not play. The space between the notes is where the music breathes, where the listener's mind enters and participates, where the emotion settles rather than being immediately overwritten by the next sound." Communication works the same way. The pause after a powerful statement, the silence that invites the other person to go deeper than they plan to, the breath before the punchline, the moment of stillness that lets an idea land before the next idea arrives to crowd it out. Advanced communicators use silence not as empty space to be filled, but as an active element of their communication, one that is doing something specific and purposeful. They understand that the listener's brain needs time to process, feel, and integrate what is just received. They understand that rushing from point to point is the conversational equivalent of eating a beautiful meal so fast that you taste nothing. They understand that the most powerful thing sometimes, in the right moment, is to say exactly the right thing and then stop completely and let the room hold what was just said. Silence is not the absence of communication. In the hands of a master, it is the most powerful communication tool of all. Chapter 39, The Art of the Apology. There's an art to apologizing, and almost no one practices it. The most common version of the apology in daily life is not really an apology at all. It is a defensive maneuver that looks like an apology. I'm sorry you felt that way. I'm sorry if my actions caused any offense. I'm sorry, but you have to understand that I was under a lot of pressure. These formulations use the word sorry while simultaneously refusing to take genuine ownership of the impact. And they are perceived as deeply unsatisfying, often more so than no apology at all, because they combine performance of remorse with the substance of denial. A genuine apology has a specific structure that is different from the defensive version in every meaningful way. First, it names a specific action. Not, I'm sorry for whatever happened, but I'm sorry for interrupting you in that meeting and then taking credit for the idea you had shared with me privately. Second, it acknowledges the impact, not defensively qualified, but clearly stated. I understand it was both professionally damaging and personally hurtful, and you had every right to be angry. Third, it takes full ownership without explanation or justification. The most common mistake of genuine attempt at apology is the sentence that follows, I'm sorry, with but. I'm sorry, but I was stressed. I'm sorry, but you need to understand. The moment the but appears, the apology is over. The explanation that follows may be true and even worth sharing, but belongs in a separate conversation after the apology has been given cleanly, without conditions. Fourth, it names what will be done differently, not because a promise undoes a harm. It does not. But because an apology without intention of change is just a social ritual, and everyone knows it. Genuine, well-formed apologies are extraordinarily powerful. They dissolve grievances that have calcified over months or years. They rebuild trust in ways that no other single communication can. They demonstrate the kind of accountability that makes people want to stay in relationship, professional or personal, with the person apologizing. And they are rare enough that when they happen well, people remember them for the rest of their lives. Chapter 40, The Language of Possibility. In every organization, every team, every family, every community, there are two distinct communication climates. They look similar from the outside, but inside them, completely different things are possible. In the first climate, the dominant language is the language of constraint. We can't do that because the problem with that idea is that's not how we do things here. We've tried that before and it didn't work. This language does not feel dramatic. It does not announce itself as the enemy of progress. It usually comes from people who are genuinely trying to be responsible, who are trying to prevent bad outcomes, manage resources carefully, avoid risk. But the aggregate effect of this language on the people inside the organization is profound and measurable. Innovation declines. Initiative retreats. People begin to pre-censor their own ideas before they share them, because experience has taught them that new ideas primarily generate analysis of their flaws. The people who are most creative, the ones whose thinking is most likely to generate the next breakthrough, are the ones who leave first. In the second climate, the dominant language is the language of possibility, not naive, not wishful, not divorced from practical reality, but oriented toward what could be rather than anchored to what cannot be. What if we tried? How might we solve? Tell me more about that idea. What would we need for that to work? This language does not pretend that constraints do not exist. It acknowledges them, and then looks past them for the space of possibility that almost always exists beyond them. Research in organizational psychology shows that teams operating in a language of possibility climate consistently outperform teams with higher average IQ operating in a language of constraint climate. Not because the possibility language teams are smarter, because they are willing to try things, which generates the learning and experimentation from which real solutions emerge. The language you use to frame problems and ideas shapes whether the people around you feel safe to think big, take risks, and bring their best thinking into the room. That is an enormous responsibility and an enormous opportunity. Chapter 41, The Charismatic Conversationalist. There are people who, when you spend an hour with them, you leave feeling more alive than when you arrived. More interesting, more capable, more energized. The conversation itself was nourishing rather than depleting, and you find yourself thinking about the exchange for days afterward, turning something they said over in your mind, feeling the warmth of having been genuinely engaged. What specifically is happening in those interactions? It is not, primarily, that the charismatic conversationalist is saying extraordinary things. It is that they are creating the conditions for an extraordinary conversation, and most of the work they are doing is invisible. It is in what they're not doing as much as what they are. They are not waiting for their turn to speak. They are genuinely listening, and the evidence of that listening appears in their responses. In specific, follow-up questions that could only have been asked by someone who was truly paying attention. They are not managing their impression. They are not concerned, in the moment, with how they appear. This freedom from self-monitoring, what psychologist Mihai Csikszentmihalyi would recognize as a kind of flow state in conversation, is palpable. It creates a relaxed, open quality in exchange that makes the other person feel free to bring their own real self to the conversation. They make connections between what you just said and something they know, between your experience and theirs, between an idea you raise and an implication you had not noticed. These connections make the other person feel not just heard, but understood, seen in a way that goes beyond the surface of the words. They are curious about the things you are most passionate about, not the things that are most socially prestigious to be curious about. They ask about your work, your ideas, your experiences, and they ask in a way that seems genuinely interested in the specific texture of your specific life, not in a category of experience that you represent. And they are present, completely, fully, undividedly present, in a world of half attention. The experience of being in the company of someone who is fully here is so rare and so pleasant that it creates the feeling most people attribute to chemistry, when what it actually is the human experience of being genuinely met. You do not need to be more interesting to be a charismatic conversationalist. You need to be more interested. Chapter 42, Persuasion through Story Structure. We have talked about the power of storytelling. Now, let us go deeper into the specific structure of stories that consistently persuade, that do not just entertain or inform, but actually move people toward a different way of thinking, feeling, or acting. The most powerful persuasive stories share a structure that communication researchers call the transformation arc, and it is the single most psychologically compelling narrative framework available to a communicator. The transformation arc works like this. You begin with the world as it was, the before state. This is a situation before a specific insight, decision, or change. It is described in enough specific detail that the listener can inhabit it. Importantly, it is a world the listener recognizes, either because it resembles their own situation or because it is familiar enough to feel real. Then comes the catalyst, the event, the insight, the challenge, the meeting, the idea, the moment that created the possibility of change. The catalyst does not have to be dramatic. Often the most powerful catalysts are quietly decisive moments, a question someone asked that could not be unasked, a piece of information that reframed everything, a failure that finally broke open the resistance to trying something different. Then comes a struggle, the period where the change is being attempted but is not yet complete, where the old ways and the new possibilities are in tension, where progress is not linear and the outcome is genuinely uncertain. This part of the story is not comfortable, and most people skip it, which is exactly why stories that include it feel more honest and more moving than the ones that do not. We trust struggle. We distrust the story that goes straight from problem to solution without acknowledging what it actually costs to change. Then comes the transformation, the moment when something genuinely and irreversibly shifts. Not the end of all problems, but a fundamental change in the character's relationship to the challenge, the world, or themselves. And then comes a new world. What is different now? What is possible that was not possible before? What the character knows or can do or sees that they could not before the journey. This structure works because it mirrors the actual shape of human experience. It has a beginning and end of all great stories, and a difficult middle that most stories skip, but all lives contain. When people hear it, their brains recognize it as true, and truth in communication is the most persuasive force that exists. Chapter 43, The Long Game of Reputation. We have spent much of this audiobook on the moment of the conversation, on what happens in the room between people in real time. But the most powerful communication any person does is not in any single conversation. It is in the pattern across all conversations, over time. Reputation is the accumulation of your communication. It is what the people who have encountered you in meetings and negotiations, in difficult moments, in generous moments, in moments when they needed something and you either came through or did not, carry in their understanding of who you are. It is the story they tell about you when you are not in the room. And reputation is, among other things, an enormous communication multiplier. It changes the context into which your words arrive. When someone with a reputation for honesty says, "I believe in this," it carries more weight than the same sentence from someone whose relationship honesty is unclear. When someone with a reputation for fairness disagrees with you, you are more likely to actually consider their perspective rather than simply looking for reasons to dismiss it. When someone with a reputation for competence and care makes a request, it is received differently than the identical request from someone whose competence and care are unknown. You are building your reputation, consciously or not, in every interaction. The email you send at 11 at night that is thoughtful rather than reactive. The meeting where you give credit to the person whose idea it was rather than absorbing it into the collective we. The difficult conversation where you tell the truth even though the comfortable lie was available. The moment of pressure where you demonstrated that your values hold under conditions rather than just in pleasant circumstances. These moments are small individually. They are enormous collectively. They are the substance of what people carry of you in their minds. They are the real legacy of your communication. Build the reputation you want to deserve, not the other way around. Chapter 44, Mastering the Follow-Through. There is a moment in many training programs and self-development journeys that communication experts call the implementation gap. It is the space between understanding a principle and actually changing behavior, between knowing and doing. This gap is wider and more persistent than most people expect. You can understand, intellectually and completely, everything in this audiobook and still have precisely the same conversations tomorrow that you had yesterday. Because behavior change is not accomplished by comprehension. It is accomplished by practice, and specifically by the kind of deliberate practice that is focused on closing specific, identified gaps in skill, not the vague rehearsal of what you already do comfortably. Research from cognitive science on skill acquisition shows that the fastest path to genuine behavioral change in communication is not the most common one. The most common path is to try to hold many principles in mind simultaneously and implement them all at once, which is neurologically impossible, creates performance anxiety, and typically results in the person reverting to their default communication patterns under any kind of pressure. The faster path is to select one specific behavior, one concrete, observable thing you want to do differently in conversation, and focus exclusively on that one behavior in every conversation until it becomes automatic, until it requires no conscious attention, and only then to add the next behavior. A person who spends 2 weeks doing nothing but genuinely pausing before they respond, not rushing, not filling silence, just breathing and thinking, will make a greater and more durable shift in their communication than a person who tries to simultaneously remember all 20 principles, succeeds in the training context, and reverts to defaults in the first high-stakes conversation. One thing, all the way to automatic. Then the next. This is a path. It is slower at the start and faster at the end. Chapter 45. The conversation you keep having with yourself. There's a conversation that never stops. You are having it right now, beneath whatever you are consciously attending to. You have been having it since you were old enough to form an interior monologue. And it is the most influential conversation of your entire life. Because it is a conversation that shapes every other conversation you will ever have. It is the conversation you have with yourself. Psychologists call this self-talk, and decades of research confirm what most of us suspect. The way we talk to ourselves about ourselves has a profound effect on our behavior, our confidence, our resilience, and our relationships. The internal narrator who tells you, you're going to fail at this, before a high-stakes conversation is not a neutral observer reporting facts. It is an active participant in the conversation, one whose influence is enormous and whose accuracy is often very poor. Carol Dweck's foundational research on mindset shows that the internal story we tell ourselves about our own capabilities, whether we believe we are fixed entities with given levels of skill and intelligence or developing entities who grow through effort and practice, determines not just how hard we try, but what we actually achieve. The self-talk of a fixed mindset says, I'm not a natural communicator. The self-talk of a growth mindset says, I haven't mastered this skill yet. The word yet is one of the most powerful words in the vocabulary of human development. It transforms a judgment into a direction. It converts a current limitation into a temporary state on the way to something better. It changes what is possible. There's also a body of research, some of the most striking in communication psychology, on what happens when people change their self-talk from second person to third person. Instead of telling yourself, I'm so nervous, I'm going to mess this up, you use your own name. Sarah's nervous about this presentation, and that's okay. Sarah's prepared well and knows her material. This third-person shift, called self-distancing, has been shown to reduce anxiety, improve decision-making under pressure, and increase perseverance after failure. It sounds almost absurdly simple, but the science is robust. The observer's perspective, even a self-created one, creates the psychological space to respond rather than merely react. Change the story you tell yourself. Watch the rest begin to change. Chapter 46. The hidden currency of social capital. There is a currency more powerful than money in the world of professional and social success. It does not appear on any balance sheet. It cannot be directly purchased. But the people who have a lot of it can do things that people with money but not this currency cannot. They can open doors that appear to be locked, smooth conflicts that look intractable, and access opportunities that have not yet been publicly announced. This currency is social capital, and it is built almost entirely through communication. Social capital is the accumulated trust, goodwill, and reciprocal obligation that exists between you and the people in your network. It is the reason a phone call from one person gets returned immediately, while an identical call from someone else sits unanswered. It is the reason some people are included in conversations before decisions are made, while others are informed of decisions after they have already been finalized. Social capital is built through a specific pattern of communicative behavior, and the pattern is simpler than most people assume. Give more than you take. This is the most fundamental rule of social capital accumulation, and it is violated constantly by people who approach their professional networks transactionally, who engage with others primarily when they need something and disengage when they do not. The transactional networker is recognized immediately and avoided proportionally. They make deposits only when they want to make a withdrawal, and over time, their social account balance approaches zero. The people with deep social capital are the ones who have developed the habit of giving without immediate expectation of return, who share useful information without being asked, who make introductions that they do not personally benefit from, who remember what matters to the people in their lives, and check in when those things come up. This is not strategic generosity. Generosity performed while secretly calculating the return. It is genuine generosity rooted in the belief that building other people up and contributing to their success is intrinsically worthwhile. And paradoxically, this genuine generosity produces the most powerful social capital returns of all, because people can feel the difference between being genuinely cared about and being cultivated. The communicator who gives generously, listens deeply, and maintains genuine relationships over time builds a network that is not just valuable, it is loyal. And loyal networks do things that valued networks will not. Chapter 47, the final conversation. Let me tell you about a conversation I want you to imagine. You are 80 years old. You are sitting with someone who is in a position you were in 20 years ago, struggling, uncertain, full of potential, but full of fear. And they ask you, what do you know about how to communicate, how to connect, how to influence that you wish you had known when you were my age? What would you tell them? I think you would not tell them about the tactical things, not about the specific frameworks for opening a negotiation or the technique for maintaining eye contact. Those might come up, but they would not be the center. I think you would tell them that the most important thing is the intention behind every word, that the people who change the world through their communication, the leaders, the teachers, the parents, the activists, the creators, were not primarily skilled. They were primarily genuine. Their skill was in service of their genuine desire to reach another human being, to make something understood, to move something that mattered in the direction of something better. I think you would tell them that listening, really listening, was a thing that opened more doors than anything they ever said, that the people who changed their life were almost always the ones who made them feel, in a particular conversation, that they were the most important person in the room, not by technique, but by genuine attention. I think you would tell them that the conversations they were afraid to have were almost always the ones that mattered most, that the difficult conversation they kept avoiding was usually the one that, when it finally happened, changed everything for the better, that the courage to speak truthfully, with kindness and clarity, in the moments when evasion was available, was one of the things they were proudest of when they looked back. And I think you would tell them that every conversation is an opportunity, not in the transactional sense of getting something from it, but in the human sense of making a real connection, of leaving someone slightly more seen, slightly more understood, slightly more capable, slightly more hopeful than they were before you spoke. That this, accumulated over a lifetime of conversations, is what actually matters. The 80-year-old version of you already knows all of this. The rest is just a journey of learning it in time to use it. Chapter 48, The 12 Principles of Speaking Smart. We are near the end of our journey together. And before we arrive at the conclusion, let me gather the most essential principles. Not as a checklist, but as a constellation of ideas that together constitute a complete philosophy of powerful communication. The first principle: speak to be understood, not to be impressive. The goal of every conversation is connection and clarity, not the performance of your own intelligence. The communicator who sacrifices clarity for cleverness always loses. The second principle: listen with genuine curiosity, not as a technique, as a value. The person who is truly curious about others will never struggle to hold a conversation, never lack for influence, never be forgotten. The third principle: manage your state before you manage your message. What you communicate is always downstream of how you feel while you're communicating. Invest in the preparation of your internal state as seriously as the preparation of your content. The fourth principle: use stories to teach and facts to confirm. Stories change minds. Data provides permission to stay changed. Use them in that order. The fifth principle: be specific. Always, in everything. Vague language is the enemy of credibility, the enemy of memory, and the enemy of genuine connection. Specificity is the basis of all of them. The sixth principle: own the silence. The pause is not empty. The pause is powerful. The communicator who can sit in silence without rushing to fill it communicates something that no words can. They are comfortable here. They are not afraid of this moment. The seventh principle: lead with warmth and follow with competence. People decide whether to trust you before they decide whether to believe you. Warmth earns the audition. Competence earns the relationship. The eighth principle: ask more than you tell. The question is the intelligence. The willingness to genuinely not know and to want to find out is one of the most disarming and effective communication behaviors available. The ninth principle: make conflict collaborative. There is almost no interpersonal conflict that cannot be improved by shifting from adversarial positioning to collaborative problem solving. Find the shared interest. Build the frame around it. Work from there. The 10th principle: your reputation is your most powerful communication. What you say in this moment is shaped entirely by what you have said and done in every moment before it. Build the pattern that builds the reputation you want to carry. The 11th principle: vulnerability is strength. The willingness to be genuinely known, to show the complexity and uncertainty and humanity that you actually contain, is not a communication risk. It is a communication advantage. The world is full of performances. People are hungry for what is real. And the 12th principle, the one that contains all the others: people want to be understood more than they want anything else you can offer them. If you make this your mission in every conversation, not to be heard, but to ensure they feel heard, everything else will follow. The influence, the trust, the connection, the change. These 12 principles are not techniques. They are a way of being in conversation with the world. Practice them until they are not principles anymore, but simply who you are. Chapter 49, The Practice of a Lifetime. Communication mastery is not a destination. It is a practice. And the word practice is important. It implies not perfection, but consistent, intentional engagement. The musician who practices daily does not arrive at a day when practice is no longer needed. They arrive at a relationship with their instrument that is so deep and so refined that the music becomes more fully what it was always trying to be. This is a trajectory available to you. Every conversation you have from this day forward is a practice opportunity, not in the sense of treating people as training material. That would violate the foundational principle of genuine regard for other human beings, but in the sense of approaching each conversation with intention, with the question: what is the highest version of this interaction I am capable of right now? Sometimes the answer will be spectacular. You will find the words that were needed. You will ask the question that opens something. You will hold the silence that allows the real conversation to begin. You will tell the story that lands exactly right, and watch something shift in someone's face in real time. Sometimes the answer will be ordinary. The conversation will be fine, competent, functional, unremarkable. That is also what practice looks like. Not every day is a breakthrough. The value of practice is not in the peaks. It is in the gradual, cumulative raising of the floor, the baseline quality of engagement that becomes available to you without conscious effort. And sometimes you will get it wrong. You will rush when you should have paused. You will talk when you should have listened. You will say the thing that felt right in the moment and realize 5 minutes later it was the wrong thing. This also is practice. The debrief after the conversation, the honest assessment of what happened and what you would do differently, is where some of the most valuable learning occurs. Keep a communication journal if this resonates with you. At the end of each day, note one conversation that went well and why. Note one that did not go as you hoped and what you understand now that you did not understand then. Over months, this simple practice creates a clarity about your specific patterns, your strengths and your recurring blind spots that no training program can produce. The path is long. It is also extraordinarily rewarding because this practice is not separate from your life. It is your life. Every relationship you will build, every opportunity you will create, every mark you will leave on the people and places and projects you care about, all of it flows through conversation. The investment in becoming a more powerful communicator is the investment in the quality of your entire human experience. Chapter 50, The Last Words. There's a moment, rare, precious, and more available to you now than it has ever been, when you sit across from another human being and you are both fully present, not performing, not managing, not strategizing. Just two people genuinely meeting in the space between words, reaching through language the thing that language can sometimes almost touch. Connection. Real human connection. The experience of being truly known by another person and truly knowing them. Of being changed by an encounter. Of walking away from a conversation feeling that something in you has shifted, that you see something differently, that you are less alone, that the world is slightly larger and more full of possibility than it was before. This is what communication is for at its highest level. Not persuasion, not influence, not the accumulation of social capital or the management of reputation. Those are the consequences. The real thing, the thing that all of the science and psychology and technique and practice is pointing toward, is connection. Human beings are the only creatures who can sit down with a stranger and, through nothing but the arrangement of sounds and the willingness to be genuinely present with each other, cross the uncrossable distance between two separate lives. Who can take something that exists only in the interior of one mind, a feeling, an idea, a vision of something that does not yet exist, and transmit, imperfectly but miraculously, into the interior of another? Every principle in this audiobook is in service of that miracle. The pause before you speak, so what you say is true. The genuine curiosity, so the other person feels worth knowing. The specificity, so the image in your mind can actually travel to theirs. The vulnerability, so you can both stop performing and start meeting. The warmth, so the room is safe enough for real things to be said. The story, so the truth can arrive not just in the mind but in the body, in the feeling, in the place where real change begins. You carry everything you have heard in this audiobook now, not as information, as possibility, as the beginning of a different relationship with every conversation you will ever have. Walk into your next conversation differently, not with performance, with presence, with genuine curiosity about the person in front of you, with the confidence of someone who knows that what they carry is worth sharing, with the generosity of someone who understands that listening is the greatest gift one human being can offer another. Speak your truth clearly and kindly. Ask questions that show you care about the answer. Make the people in your life feel, regularly and specifically, that they matter to you. Tell the stories that only you can tell. Hold your silence with the confidence of someone who knows that not every space needs to be filled. Do these things, not perfectly, but persistently, and watch what happens to the world around you. Watch who stays. Watch what opens. Watch how the quality of your conversations begins to transform the quality of your life. Because in the end, every life is a collection of conversations. And the question is not whether you will speak. The question is whether, when you open your mouth, what comes out will be worth the miracle of being heard. You already know the answer. Go speak it. And so it ends. not with the last word, but with the first conversation you will have differently. That conversation begins now.